to like my stuff out.
All right, cool. So today we're going to be talking about Cypress, which is a JavaScript-based end-to-end testing tool. It's kind of fun, so I thought, okay, let's just get into it. There's a lot of things that happens with it, like nitty-gritties, but I think it's still useful to at least get a feel of it and just get started and see how they're structured this. So today I'm the agenda, just at a high level, why do we need an integration tool and why do we need one more? Some of the features, some really cool features of it, and we'll go through some examples of how this could be even useful. So why do we need integration tests, right? So this is a personal thing. So we were looking at within our company, we were looking at the unit tests that we have. Number one, we were aiming for okay, let's just get 100% code coverage, right? Great, but it can easily give you a false sense of security. So it may not be, you may have 100% code coverage, great, all your methods are covered, but it's still, a user behaves weirdly, differently, and in ways that you can't even imagine. So, you're still not going to be able to, cover all the instances. Secondly, what we found was a lot of the unit tests were actually integration tests. They were not really unit tests. If you look at it, some of them that they were either stubbing out response calls, but they were still behaving as an integration test. So integration tests are really important. You might think, oh, it gets flaky, you're testing multiple things at a time, but that's how the user behaves. So there is importance to having integration tests. All right, second one was Selenium is a very you might have heard of it. It's a pretty commonly used end-to-end testing tool. Has been around for a while. It's a fully open source library that you can use. It has a lot of advantages. I love it. I've used it for many years now, and I enjoy using it. But there are a few things that makes it a little wonky. First of all, it's a little old. It's been at least 15 years since it was launched. So it is aging. And when you use, and obviously modern web apps have continued to flourish and grow, so things like dynamic elements on the page, Selenium doesn't handle that. You need to be able to write custom handlers for that. An example is you access a web page, you have something dynamic happening on the page and a button shows up, based on some actions. You need to be able to wait for that button to display before you interact with it. So you're actually building custom handlers for things like that. So what happens is when you end up having so much customization, wrappers, and mix-ins to work with it so that you don't have flaky tests, it almost Selenium test becomes a separate entity, a different team kind of handles it, and you start throwing things over the wall. So it's almost like, oh yeah, that's an automation test, it's an integration test, let someone else kind of handle it. So I think that's where it's heading. They are trying to keep up with most of the modern stuff, but some of the disadvantages which helps tools like Cypress come about. Last part is if you are practicing TDD, and I think it's pretty fun to use that or have that at the back of your mind. When you're using test-driven development, Cypress is really offering this on steroids. You can actually look at your console log, you can do network monitoring, you can even stub your calls. So everything that you would need, Cypress is kind of offering that within that system so that you could really be able to use the methodology of test-driven development. So just high level why we why this tool may be important for your use case. So some features, again, high level features. It's a single library install. What do I mean that? So this is like a Node.js library. So once you have that, you have no other dependencies. So if you're running an integration test, most likely it's going to open up a browser, click on certain elements and things like that. So when you're using Selenium, you probably need other things to work with it. So you need something like Chrome driver to drive the Chrome browser. In the Python world, I may use something like Beautiful Super request, which makes HTTP requests, and Beautiful Soup is more like a HTML parser. So all those are additional things that you need to keep adding on to build a good test suite. Whereas Cypress kind of has all that inbuilt for you because they're kind of reimagined this ground up. There is a fundamental difference between the way Selenium works and the way Cypress works. So Selenium is actually an external system which controls the browser from the outside. So it uses WebDriver API to externally control whatever URL you feed it. So So really, so it doesn't really, can't really hook into your network logs or your monitoring. So you can't really do anything because it's coming from the outside. Cypress is more a system. It's a Node.js server process that actually operates right whenever you start up your server. So what they're going with is mostly when you're doing local development and you're running it on localhost. That's when kind of Cypress is really powerful because it's having the same server process and kind of has access to all those requests and can control the requests and responses. Whereas Selenium is more like, hey, outside looking in some sense. Syntax-wise, Cypress is easy if you're familiar with JavaScript and you're using like things like Mocha or Chai, which is like unit testing tools. It uses similar syntaxes, so things like describe, which is again a syntax from I think Mocha, describe init is all in-baked. So it's kind of, they've used those already within Cypress, so it understands those syntaxes automatically. One of the cool things is it has a dashboard out of the box. So what do I mean by that? So you'll see it. So when you install Cypress and you start, it already has a dashboard for you that captures screenshots and videos and allows you to do debugging at a much more ingrained way. Things like screenshots and videos are still something that, in the Selenium world, all that we have to like build out, like customize it. Options are available, but you gotta like customize those things. But Cypress already has that out of the box, right? So you can get started and write those tests that much faster. Runs against Chrome, Canary, Chromium are all Chrome open source. Chrome is kind of built on that. Electron headless version. So it's weird. It's strange that they're not going after like Firefox and Internet Explorer. I don't think that's their goal, but you can work with some of these browsers if needed. But this is still pretty good to like do some of the TDD stuff. So these are the real basic features. Some really interesting stuff, and you'll see this when we get into the examples. When you're working and you make changes and you have Cypress running, it does live reloads. So your test folder will automatically run those tests when you make changes and you're actively developing on your code, which is kind of cool. They have something called fixtures. So if you throw in, fixtures is nothing but, okay, if you have a bunch of data that you want to use in your tests, you can use them and throw them into like a little JSON file that you can then call in your test. It's just out of the box again. You don't have to like do that. You can write in JavaScript, CoffeeScripts, and even I think TypeScript, but it requires a little adjustments. But so we can write a Cypress test in any of those file types. This was interesting. I thought you can forcibly fire events just clicking on a button. Sometimes if it's flaky and the button is not really interactable, but you don't really care about it, you still want to like forcibly click on it. You can fire such events to work with the browser. You can blacklist hosts. So an example would be a localhost development. If you have Google Analytics or some kind of analytics that you're firing, you don't want to like fire those events out if you're testing something locally. So you can blacklist hosts. You can say, okay, I don't. It not only makes the test faster, but also you don't want to like muddy up your analytics or metrics. Like I mentioned, you can do some stubbing responses. So because you can actually use Cypress even as a unit testing tool. So if you want to use it in that manner, you can even stub the responses, and it already has an inbuilt request system. The last one is interesting. I don't have a use case yet, but say your system had a set interval in your when the program ran, you could actually make use of a clock library that they have that can advance the, if you want to like have control over the time that you set, so you can actually go forward in time, so you don't have to wait for an event to happen. So I thought that was kind of neat. Some additional notes, like I said, there's no ability yet, or at least I didn't see an ability to tag tests. By tagging, I mean like sometimes it's if you just want to run a certain subset of tests which touches certain aspects of your application, you could control, but they don't seem to have a way where I can tag certain things in different ways. Like I mentioned, no Firefox or IE support. And then if you're running these tests in parallel, they do have an option to run it in parallel as well. If you're running them in parallel, you may not have control over how that parallelization happens. Sometimes if you want to get into the details and you want to okay, I want to make sure that only the slowest tests runs first, all grouped together, and then the faster ones, you don't really get that fine-grained control. So that's like the high-level overview of the features that it has. So we'll get into some examples. We'll see how it, some of the libraries, some of the commands that they have, and see how that functions. Cool. So we'll try out. So I was thinking, why don't we try out? I have the devICT repo locally, so I thought let's try writing some in here. All right. So in case you haven't seen the devICT, I think it's a Yugo server. So I already have Cypress installed, but if you look at the docs, it's just it's an npm installation. When you do install, if you already, it's agnostic, so if you have a Python Flask application, it doesn't really matter, you can still install, npm install Cypress. But the only thing which is, if you're doing that, it just needs to make sure that it has like a package.json and it has npm modules in it, so you need to do like npm init to start it. But say you go ahead and do npm install Cypress, what it does is it creates a cypress.json file, and it creates a Cypress folder for you. So these are the two things that you get out of the box when you execute, when you do an npm install Cypress. So what do you actually have within it? So if you look at the Cypress.json file, so this is like a config management for Cypress, and it has a bunch of different things that you can set. So, and then one example is like a base URL. So in your test, so say every single time you don't want to say, okay, I want to go to this particular URL, you can throw that in, and then in your test, you can just say slash or slash about, and it'll go to the base URL plus, whatever some URL you give it. There are other config things too that you can throw in. You can throw in things like if you want to have a longer timeout, Cypress by default has 4-second timeout while looking for an element. You can change that, override those things as well. You want to set environment variables that you can call in your test. That can be set in this JSON file as well. So that's what you get when in the Cypress. You can control those in the Cypress.json file. We'll look at the actual Cypress folder, because that's what gets generated when you do npm install on Cypress. The folder itself has, so when you do, within Cypress you have fixtures. Again, I don't do anything really here. This is all like, again, when I install, you have something called fixtures. So within that, like I mentioned, fixtures is a way you can throw in like have variables and things that you can call in your test. So if you want data that you can always look at, you can throw that into fixtures. Integration is where all the tests would reside. Plugins is just an out-of-the-box thing that Cypress has. Screenshots and videos is something that, again, Cypress will automatically create when you run these tests. So it'll create a video for you and throw that in. It'll take screenshots for you and throw that into the folder. All right, so let's give it a shot. So knowing that, I'll give you one example of fixtures, because I already have this a little bit. So here's an example of what that may look like. So anything that you think that you may need in your test, so which may change often, so things like, so in this case, if I just want like an email address or a Slack URL that devICT has, and things that you want to just throw in and just put,
Can you zoom in on my link? Thank you.
Actually, maybe it's better for me to use.
Oh, sorry.
Let's just use this, that may be better. Is that better?
Yeah.
So, so the fixtures file would, say I call it data.json, right? Anything that you think that would change or you require in the test, you can just throw that in here and then call it in the test. So that basically it. So going back, I was thinking, let's try out these different scenarios. So let's try out the first one. if you go to devICT, there's a banner that we have, I think. So yeah, so there's a banner here, and if you look at it, you know, if a lot of them are coming, they're going to see this little button first, and you want to make sure that this button actually works. Just as a simplistic example, this button works, and when you click on it, it actually goes to About, right? So let's try what that test would look like. So, like I mentioned, with an integration, let's throw that in. Let's call it homepage. I'm just going to write it in JavaScript. So let's first load up. I think there are different ways where you can load up the fixtures file that I have, but let's just load it up this way. Bear with me while I try to. So here I'll go into a little bit of the syntax. Like I mentioned, I think this is Mocha syntax where it has describe and id. So this is like behavior-driven style of development where you're describing what you want to test. So in this case, let's just say it's the homepage stuff, right? So let's describe the action that you want to take. So let's just say check, you know, home, the area that you're checking, homepage banner. It should work, like, you know, maybe the banner should work. Click on the link, banner link should work. So now we're getting into the Cypress, you know, library commands. So basically what you're trying to do here is you need to go visit the homepage, right? So CY is the short form for whatever Cypress has. So if you do cypress.visit, which is go visit a URL. Now, like I said, in the Cypress.json file, we already set up base URL as localhost, you know, whatever port. So in this case, you don't have to put in the whole, you know, the whole entire URL. You can just put in a slash. So you visit the URL. Now, what do you want to check? You want to make sure that the banner is there, like the banner section. So how do you check for that? Like, say you want to make sure that this link is present. And when you click on it, it goes to whatever the About page. So usually you want to inspect that element. So in this case, let's hope that it has a unique. Okay, so it has like a class called banner title and banner link. So let's just go with banner title. So we want to make sure that that's the title, right? So visit that page. You want to be able to get that particular element. So title, you can do something called, so what you got that element. Now say you want to check for the text within that element. So in this case it was set which does developer community. Again, these are all like visit, get, contains. These are all Cypress API commands which you can look up. But it contains, in this case was which does developer community. Right. So that's the test, and you can already see, which is kind of cool. I mean, if I had like a comparison with the Selenium test, basically if I was writing a Selenium test, I would visit a URL, I would have to write something that says, okay, let's wait for this element to show up. Then I would check for the text. The cool thing about Cypress is that it has inbuilt waits in it, so it doesn't execute. It already has a little bit of smartness where it says, okay, I want to go get that title, but it'll wait till it can find it. All right, so that's the first test. So now let's give it a shot to run. So I'll show you what happens. So the way you run it is, so there's a way to run the entire test suite. So it'll find everything within the infrastructure folder that we the integration folder that you saw within Cypress. But there's also a way to just open up Cypress and look at the folder and run the test. So we'll do that first. So come on, this is Cypress open. Okay, there you go. So this is an automatic thing. What you see here is, again, it's a Cypress, like I was mentioning, it has an out-of-the-box dashboard system, so nothing here is from me. All it did was, it automatically looks in the Cypress/integration folder and looks up all the tests that's within it. So the one that we wrote was homepage.js. So let's execute that. Let's see what happens. So you see how Chrome opened up automatically. It accesses that URL. So that's kind of cool, right? So you see how it, it's already got the homepage banner, which is the describe action. Banner link should work. For some reason, it couldn't get the. We'll look into that. But if you see all this, so it automatically found my Chrome thing. You can run it, like I mentioned, you can run it headless. But let's just use Chrome by default here. So what I'm trying to do is to visit this page and then check that it has banner title, but I couldn't find that. Oh, okay, so it's a class, right? Well, it's just missing the dot. So, but here, check this out. So when you actually click on it, you can see, the URL that it went for. You couldn't really get that. It timed out trying to find it. But if you saw, it actually waited 4 seconds before, it timed out. So it has a little bit of like inbuilt checks. So let's go back to the test. It's basically just missing a dot for the class. So, oh, did you see that? So I just said I did a command S which saved. So like I mentioned, it has like a live reload. So it just ran the test. So I run the test now. So it was pretty quick, but you can see it right here. Like it could get. This is kind of cool too, which I thought. So when you hover over banner title, it tells you the area that you're on. So you can actually see what it's saying, and I said contains which it does developer community, and if I did change that, you'll see how it's like waiting to find that element for like about 4 seconds, and then it timed out waiting for it. So it's kind of cool that you can already like write a test pretty quickly and see what is going on visually, because a lot of times you don't really have that view. It's like, okay, what am I, if I'm looking for a class called button, you don't know what, there might be like 100 buttons on the page and you don't know which one to click on, and maybe the test failed. But here you pretty clearly know that when you said banner title, it was looking at that element right there. So you can already see, like, without really much investment really from your end to set things up for the test, you get a lot of it that's already working pretty well. So let's continue on. Like, what if I had to get, so you check for that. You want to be able to click on the button and click on, go to that URL. I think this button, which had the URL, was banner link. So in this case, we'll check. So we're already on the URL. Let's just say we're going to get the banner link element. We'll click on that. And then when you click on that, you want to make sure that you're actually on the right path of wherever you are. So, so you click on it, and then the URL that you see, we'll just say URL should include about. So it's kind of cool, like, if somebody else who doesn't really know what you're doing, you can still look at it and understand, okay, what am I trying to like get out of this, right? Without really much, again, like, go back, like if you're in the Selenium world, there's a lot of stuff that you need to do just to be able to, have someone else understand what's going on. But here is pretty clean in the sense that, okay, that's pretty, like, I get what you're trying to do. So if you go back, yeah, it looks like it executed it. Let's try that again. It's pretty quick, but you can see what it was trying to do. Here's the cool thing. So you get the banner title, and when you hover over it, you can see exactly what it's doing. Gets the banner link. You see how we're going to hover over that little link. Clicks on that action, page loaded, new URL is about, and assert. So there's an assertion too that's in there. But I did say it should include about. Obviously, this is very straightforward, but the assertion would fail if we're looking for something else. So it's like, hey, I'm looking for it needs to include career, but I'm seeing it above it. So that gives you a pretty good overview of what that's trying to do. So that's just basic interactions. There are some cool things that you can do, like I think the important one for me was when I was looking at it, we get a lot of people coming in on our Slack channel, right? So we want to obviously make sure that this link is never messed up, because that's really the way that people are coming in and becoming a part of us. So there's a way we can grab the URL out. So again, if you just want to look at the comments, I can put it here. Let's just say this. Let's try this. So what I'm trying to verify is that to make sure that this link, that link actually has the right URL. So I want to show you another way where you can grab the elements out of it and make sure that the URL kind of matches up. Just to show you another aspect of what the API offers you to do. So yeah, so let's again find it by class name. So this is just the class name, right? I'm getting the class name, and then you're saying should have an attribute of href, which is the link, right? Basically, I'm looking for the link, whatever that link is. And again, so these are the things that I kind of threw into the fixtures file, because you don't want to keep. What if you update the Slack URL tomorrow? So you just want to have a single location for those kind of things. And you don't want to click on this too, because then it's a third-party URL. You don't want to do anything there. All I'm doing is to make sure that the href is the right href. So yeah, so that looked like. So this is kind of cool. So when you look at that, it says expected. You can see the button that it was hovering over with the value, whatever value that it had. So it's kind of neat that you can do all that pretty quickly, like out of the box. So you see here the assertion failure, because again, if it doesn't match up, it's kind of clean when you see the errors that show up. So this is when you're doing development locally, right? But what if I just want to, it's part of CI and you just want to run the whole thing? You don't really care about looking at it. You just want to run all the tests. So what I did previously was npx Cypress open. If you do Cypress run, it won't show you the Chrome browser. It's just going to automatically find you all the tests with the integration folder and just run that for you. So when I do that, so now you actually won't even see the browser open. So it's actually using Electron, which is a headless version, which is cool because it, again, if you look at the output of the test log, I'm not sure what the buffer is, but if you look at the home page check, you'll see where the banner has correct Slack URL. This was like another test thing that I have. So you already have like, okay, test passing, how many of them failed, and all that kind of statistics. This is kind of cool too. Like videos already created for me in there, without me again having to do anything. So if I look at that folder. There's that video if you ever want to see what that test did. See exactly what we saw then. Oh, that was a video but you can kind of see what it did. So it already has all that kind of built in, which I thought was interesting, because again, you don't want to spend your time figuring those things out. You just want to be able to write the test and get value of that pretty quickly. So that I think it does a good job there. About making sure that the value at least is pretty apparent pretty quickly. We'll try one more thing. We'll try one more example, and I want to show you why I think it's also kind of interesting. Let's try.
Is it an issue when you have like multiple buttons that have the same class?
Yeah, so that's where I think the local development is kind of critical. One of the things that we always say is like for testing, and that's what I did here with, because I can control the HTML now, it's always kind of neat to have either a data attribute that's specific for testing so that you don't, if you change the button class, you're not going back and fixing those kind of issues. Or you create a special kind of naming that's only for testing. So I think that really goes a long way. But now, because you're in control, again, it's not like, okay, I need some class, a front-end guy will write it for you. You can actually go in and just create a data attribute or a class name that is that you're going to use purely for testing. So things like this, the P Slack button, nobody's going to touch that, right? But if I did something like button, that's probably not the best thing that you want to go with.
So on that button, can you launch or load the website and see if you get like a 200 or something else back, like the status code?
Yeah. So there are, so now again, within the API itself, there's a bunch of other commands that you can use that you can actually check the request and the response data. So you can look for the cookies that came back and which are set. You can look at the body and the header and all that kind of stuff. So you have a hook into the, even if you're just interested to see what the header request is or what you got back, that's all available for you. So some of the tests which they also talk about, if you had a login system, you don't want to or say you had a registration system, you just need one test that verifies the UI part, and say you had another test in the dashboard that verifies something in the dashboard, but you don't need a test that's always like going through the UI and creating a new user just because you want to be in the dashboard. So there are ways that you can use like the request module that has just by bypassing that. Either it throws in a cookie so that it behaves like you're logged in, or you use like a request module by sending the appropriate like password or the username without really going through the UI, because you have one test that verifies the login and the registration part. So that's the nice part too. You're not wasting time. If you're looking at something in the dashboard, you don't need to check the UI of login and registration. You can kind of bypass that with some of the requests. The second example I was going to show you was how do you want to fill, because you may work a lot with forms, so filling data into a form. So I was going to use the code of conduct. I don't know if there are other forms, but I was going to use a code of conduct and send Jacob some forward to it. But yeah, we could try that. So. Report. Something similar. I would do something similar on this page. So if you go to the code of conduct page that we have, report an incident, you will see like a simple form in there. But again, if this is not working, we're not going to get any of the incident reports. So we want to kind of make sure that this form is working the way it should be. So we look at the form. The important part is the action, because that's where stuff is going. You want to make sure that the method is right. So you could write a little quick test, pretty quick to throw in, right? So if I had to write this, I would just say CY.get, trying to get the report page, similar to the one that we had before. Let's visit. So you want to get. In this case, let's just get, I think there's only one form on the page, so let's get the form. And what should the form have? It should have an attribute called action, where wherever it's found. So similar to how we did the link href, you can do, you can check for that. So that's pretty quick to throw in and make sure that the action is correct. So that does that. If you want to fill out the elements, again, you can get this by class name or CSS selector. So CSS selector kind of works like find a text area dot the class in this case. So it gives me a little bit more control. Let's say there are multiple buttons. This is only one text area there. I think it is fill, so you can fill whatever. Yeah, so I think that should work. Let's see where it goes. Is it tight? Yeah, there you go. So, yeah, you can see it kind of filled out whatever element that you want. You can even make sure that the value in that field is what you're looking for. So, you just want to make sure, because sometimes you could type that in, but if it's like, I don't know if it's disabled or something that's not there, so you can do a double check to make sure that that the value in there should kind of match up.
Yeah, because like in React, it's easy to set it up so that it doesn't go, you type it and it disappears nowhere.
Yeah.
Some framework is easy to do.
Yeah, so anyway, this kind of, just to show you the failed, because the value is actually not that. I had a little, emoji in there, but that's kind of not matching up, so it shows you. So that's just a quick example where you can fill things up for you. I don't want to click on the button, but you can make sure that the button is there and it's visible. So you can do things like when I check for have value, there are other things that you can do like have class should be visible, so you can check to make sure that that element is visible. So if you just said should be visible, that was good enough for the test. So there's a lot of control in there that you can kind of do to control things like filling up the form and stuff. The last part I was going to wanted to show, there's also things like on the videos page, we have 8 videos, so you want to make sure that there are always 8 videos. You can even do that because you can get back the length of all the elements in there and then check to make sure that there are enough videos. The last part I kind of wanted to show you, which I thought was useful, is looking for JavaScript errors, because as you know, if there's a JavaScript error, a lot of times it just fails silently. You don't even know that it's broken. So let me show you an example. If you go back to the devICT page, let's see if there are any errors first of all. That way I can take part in Hacktoberfest and file in a little. Let's see if there are any. Okay, doesn't look like it. So there are no errors in there, but let's just add one in. It seems to be this. Okay, so here's the error. Like you can see the JavaScript error, but you're not going to notice it, right? Because the site looks fine. There's nothing wrong with the website, but it may come up in like various things. Maybe a button is not clickable. Something is weird because of a JavaScript error. The cool thing is when you have this test is, let's say I wanted to run the homepage test, it just won't even execute. So because it has a hook into the network and the console, when it visits this page, it can already catch that error, which I think is really useful because I don't even when I was writing tests, I still don't know if there were like JavaScript errors that were thrown that's not really visible unless I have other ways for looking for it. But this automatically just breaks down and just doesn't even go further if it finds an exception on that page. So So I thought that was kind of interesting that they have that. What was they got? So let's actually, maybe I'll open up the website. I'll go to Mike's question about. So if you go to, I mean, I'm just going to quickly show you the website. So you see, if you look at the docs. So this is what I was complaining about, because they do have an open source version, right? So if you look at it, it's fully open source, but they also have like a tiered version. That's how they kind of make the money from. But it's still their OSS is still pretty good that you can use all for. Their documentation is pretty decent. They have a lot of good examples. So especially if you're using like React apps, they have some examples of how you can work with it and some of the tests that you're thinking about. Maybe you can look at some in their example section. So they call it recipes, but if you take a look, so things like signing in, how you do that. Let's see. So if you're testing like a Redux store. So the structure looks pretty similar to what I showed you. Everything's within the Cypress folder with an integration. Yeah, a lot of it may look similar to what we just spoke about. Visiting, element should be focused, should have class and attribute. But yeah, there's a bunch of documentation in there if it's kind of interesting. I was just going to look through the way to make requests, because I thought that was kind of cool too, but I don't have an example. So here's the example where you can make you don't have to visit that URL itself, like what Mike was asking, so you could do a cy.request, whatever page that you have. And then I think you get back, whatever method you want, but you have a hook into all these different things that you can get out of it. So you can get the status, the body, the headers, the duration. So if instead of cy.visit, I could have just done like cy.request, the URL and the method that I wanted. I was going to show you this too, which was they also have like a before each, basically a test set up in Teardown, which is kind of common. So if you wanted to seed data or clear up the database before you started this test, but you wanted to make sure on the home page you have some information that you wanted to seed it with. Right at the start, you can do something like before each. And you can tell it what you wanted to do. So technically, you use this to either clear up the database, clear up everything, and then restart, or seed some information in if you need it. It also has an after each. You can do things like if you want specific timers and you want to hook into the stuff like how long did this stuff take. So you're going to see right here, so it logs starting stuff, so you can throw in all that extra information if you want. So yes, it also has that capability. What else was interesting in there?
I don't know. On the website, could you look? I think there's somewhere they say when you create a request, I'm telling to wait on the request, and I think that was one of the things that got me. Because there was a time back I was trying to test like a login, and then we tried to test the next page, but the login request does not come back. I think there's a way you can cook a wait, but I think that might be helpful to everyone else.
Was that part of the clock stuff that I was talking about?
I would expect to be on the HTTP requests.
Request. Let's see. So this is an example of making a post request and you're waiting for the response. It is, and you can wait. It's pulling in there.
somewhere where they have the keyword as, like you create a request and then you call it as a given name. And then-
Oh, yeah, okay. Yeah, I mean, that's just like aliasing for something. So say you have a long variable name, which is input form equal to token. So you could create something like an alias. So here's an example of an alias. So basically saying CY.get button invoke test, and then you're just calling that whole thing as a single name, and then you can just call it, this.text or whatever. So if you had something which was really long, you can wrap that whole thing as a single alias and then call that. Here's an example where you have, you're calling back from the fixtures, you're calling, you're loading up users.json, but you just want to call that as users, so you're just aliasing that element. So this is an interesting way. So before everything, you're loading up that JSON file, which can then be used through the different test instances. So there are a lot of, I mean, that's just like a high-level overview, but if you take a look at the API, there's some really interesting things. So this is just, again, some of the things that we used here, like contains and should and, visit. But if you look at this a little bit more, you can do a lot more stuff, like you can get the cookies, so you can really go deeper in. And even it has access to like jQuery elements. So if you want to like use jQuery or like JavaScript, it basically just works if you want have access to those kind of things. And then like I mentioned, this was kind of neat. They do, you can stub out the response too. Again, I have mixed feelings about it, but if you do need to be able to stub out the response and then have that, you can still do that as part of this. So it really gives you a lot of things to work with. You can write it as unit tests. You want to have an integration test, you can do that. Offers you the dashboard and all that kind of stuff. So yeah, I think it's definitely worth looking into. It looks fun and interesting for me because one of the challenges that we are having is we already have the automation test room, right? So it's not going away, but we have a lot of these A/B tests that we do. So you have different versions of the website, but those are like quick. Write a quick test and throw it away because that may not be the winner in 3 weeks or a month or whatever. So we want to be able to improve the cycle of writing these tests, which are throwaway tests. We know that it's not going to be around for a long time, but we just need something for the short term. And this could be an interesting way to kind of have that. And it's an intuitive tool to use, and the API naming and conventions are pretty whatever you use. So at least it gives you that option to throw it in. That's what I had for you today.
Thank you.
Cypress.
That's awesome.
All right.